Hello, my name is Raiden. Today I'm going to talk about Iceberg Slim, whose real name was Robert Beck. Iceberg Slim is best known for writing the memoir, Pimp, The Story of My Life, which was published in 1967. The book tells the story of his life growing up in Chicago and becoming involved in crime and pimping before eventually leaving that lifestyle and becoming a writer. His work later became extremely influential in urban literature and hip hop culture. However, Iceberg Slim is also a controversial figure. Some people believe his writing exposed the harsh realities and violence of street life, while others believe his work glamorized exploitation and abuse. In this presentation, I will examine three main parts of this topic: Iceberg Slim's life and background, the cultural impact of his writing, and the criticisms and debates surrounding his work. To understand Iceberg Slim's writing, it is important to understand his life and the experiences that shaped him. Robert Beck was born in Chicago in 1918. His childhood was difficult and unstable after his father died. His mother worked as a prostitute, and Beck was exposed to street life at a very young age. Growing up in an environment filled with crime and poverty had a major influence on the choices he made later in life. As a teenager and young adult, Beck became involved in hustling and other illegal activities. Eventually, he entered the world of pimping, where he controlled and managed women who worked as prostitutes. During this time, he developed a reputation on the streets and became deeply involved in criminal activity. However, this lifestyle also came with serious consequences. Beck was arrested multiple times and spent time in prison. Prison became a turning point in his life, though. During that time, he began reflecting on the choices he had made and the damage caused by that lifestyle. After leaving prison, he decided to write about his experiences. He began using the name Iceberg Slim and eventually published his memoir, Pimp, The Story of My Life. The book describes in detail the manipulation, violence, and psychological control involved in pimp culture. Unlike many books written at the time, his writing did not try to hide the brutality of that world. Instead, it presented it in a very direct and graphic way. Because Iceberg Slim actually lived through the experiences he described, many readers felt his story had a level of authenticity that other writers could not provide. The book quickly gained attention because of how raw and honest it felt. Readers were shocked by the level of detail and by the way he explained the psychological behind controlling people and surviving in a dangerous environment. Over time, the book became a classic in urban literature and helped create a new style of storytelling focused on real experiences from life in the streets. Another important part of Iceberg Slim's legacy is the cultural impact of his writing. Even though his books were controversial, they became very popular and influenced many writers and artists. His storytelling style was direct, emotional, and very descriptive. Instead of presenting crime in a distant or romanticized way, he explains the mindset and strategies behind it. This approach influenced later writers who focused on similar topics like crime, survival, and urban life. Iceberg Slim's influence can also be seen strongly in hip hop culture. Many hip hop artists grew up reading his books and were inspired by the way he told stories about power, struggle, and survival. For example, rappers like Ice-T and Ice Cube have acknowledged that Iceberg Slim influenced their music and storytelling. His themes about street life, power dynamics, and the struggle to survive in difficult environments became common topics in rap lyrics and hip hop culture more broadly. In addition to influencing musicians, Iceberg Slim also helped create a market for what is now often called street literature or urban fiction. Today, there are many books and memoirs that focused on real experiences growing up in difficult environments or being involved in crime and survival in inner city communities. Many of these works can be traced back to the style that Iceberg Slim helped popularize. Because of this influence, some scholars argue that his work helped open the door for voices and stories that were often ignored in mainstream literature. Despite this influence, Iceberg Slim's work has also received a lot of criticism. One of the main criticisms is that the writing includes extremely graphic descriptions of violence and misogyny. The book often describes the way pimps control and manipulate women, sometimes using violence or psychological pressure. Critics argue that even if the book was meant to describe reality, it can still be harmful because it focuses so heavily on the exploitation of women. Some readers believe the book unintentionally glamours pimp culture by presenting the lifestyle in a way that seems powerful or exciting. Another criticism is that the popularity of the book may have influenced his later cultural portrayals of pimps and street crime in ways that reinforce negative stereotypes. Some scholars argue that media represents crime and violence in urban communities can contribute to misunderstandings and harmful stereotypes about race and poverty. From this perspective, Iceberg Slim's work raises important ethical questions about how stories about crime and exploitation should be told. However, supporters of Iceberg Slim argues that the purpose of the book was not to glorify that lifestyle, but to expose how destructive it really is. They argue that the violence and harsh language are included to show the truth of the world rather than to celebrate it. According to this view, Iceberg Slim was attempting to reveal the psychological manipulation and emotional damage that exists within pimp culture. Instead of hiding those realities, he forced readers to confront them directly. Supporters also point out that Beck eventually left that lifestyle and spent the rest of his life writing and speaking about his experiences. By turning his life story into literature, he transformed something destructive into something that could be analyzed, discussed, and debated. His work encourages readers to think critically about crime, power, survival, and the social conditions that can lead people into those environments in the first place. In conclusion, Iceberg Slim remains one of the most controversial figures in American urban literature. His memoir, Pimp, The Story of My Life, shocked readers with its brutally honest description of street life and became eventually extremely influential in both literature and hip-hop culture. At the same time, his work continues to raise serious ethical questions because of its depiction of violence and exploitation. Some people see his writing as an important exposure of harsh realities that society often ignores, while others believe it can contribute to harmful cultural messages regardless of how people interpret his work. Iceberg Slim's influence on storytelling, music, and discussions about urban life is undeniable. His story shows how personal experiences, even difficult and controversial ones, can shape literature and cultural conversations for generations. Thank you for listening to me talk about Iceberg Slim and his memoir, Pimp, The Story of My Life.